Welcome to Soul Stories, your home for heart-touching tales of love, hope, and second chances. If you believe in the power of kindness and the magic of unexpected connections, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our growing family. Now let's begin today's story. In a tiny rented room in an old Brooklyn neighborhood, Emery Lane sat curled up on a worn rug, her back resting against the bed frame. A dim yellow glow from the ceiling bulb cast light over the cracked, stained walls and the weathered wooden crib tucked in the corner. The soft cries of Lily and Leo, her 5-month-old twins, drifted through the room like a sad melody, tightening Emery's chest. She leaned down, gently patting Leo, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. The last can of baby formula in the cupboard held barely 1 scoop, nowhere near enough for both babies. At 23, Emery had once been a rising piano star at Juilliard. Her fingers used to glide over the keys, turning Beethoven's sonatas into stories told in sound, quieting entire auditoriums. But that dream shattered 2 years ago when she discovered she was pregnant. Ethan, her boyfriend, the same man who once promised they'd conquer Carnegie Hall together, vanished the moment she told him. "I can't," he said before disappearing, leaving Emery with heartbreak and 2 fragile lives growing inside her. Her parents, who had always expected her to bring honor to the family, disowned her. "You've shamed us," her father said coldly before slamming the door shut. Now Emery lived in this cheap rented room, working night shifts as a waitress in a small diner to care for Lily and Leo. During the day, she squeezed in moments to practice piano on a beat-up electric keyboard borrowed from a friend, still clinging to hope that she might one day return to Juilliard. But tonight, staring at the nearly empty formula container, she felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff. Holding Lily close, she whispered, "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'll find a way." She laid Lily back in the crib, picked up her old phone, its screen cracked in one corner, and scrolled through her contacts. There was no one left to ask for help. Her Juilliard friends had drifted away over time, leaving only Sarah, a former music theory classmate. Sarah was struggling too, but Emery had no other option. She opened her messaging app, fingers trembling as she typed, "I just need 1 can of formula. I'll pay you back. Please don't block me." She snapped a quick photo, herself sitting on the floor, bottle feeding Leo while Lily slept on her shoulder. The dim lighting gave the image a somber tone, but Emery's eyes still held a mix of determination and weariness. She attached the photo, pressed send, and exhaled, hoping Sarah would respond. But in her exhaustion, she hadn't double-checked the number. The message didn't go to Sarah. It landed in the inbox of a complete stranger. Dominic Kane stood by the towering window of his penthouse on the 70th floor of Kane Enterprises. Below him, the lights of New York City glittered like a sea of stars, dazzling but cold. At 35, he was the embodiment of power and success. A cold, calculated CEO running a multi-billion-dollar tech empire, with chiseled features and eyes so deep they made people uneasy. But behind the perfect facade, Dominic lived in an invisible prison, haunted by memories that refused to fade. 5 years ago, a car accident took the lives of his wife, Sophia, and their 3-year-old daughter, Ava. The blare of horns, blinding headlights, and Sophia's final scream still echoed in his nightmares. He suffered from mild PTSD, battled insomnia, and avoided anything to do with children or families. Christmas parties, the sound of children's laughter, even a stroller in the park, any of it could make his chest tighten. Dominic had mastered the art of hiding his pain, but he no longer knew how to name it. He merely existed, like a machine, day after day, in a lavish but hollow penthouse. Tonight, like every night, Dominic sat at his ebony desk, the bluish glow of his laptop casting shadows across his sharp features. He was reviewing quarterly financial reports, but his mind kept drifting. A strange unease crept in, like something was stirring beneath the layers of ice that had numbed him for years. Then his phone buzzed softly, a message from an unknown number. Dominic frowned, ready to delete it immediately. He never responded to strangers, but his eyes accidentally caught the message preview. "I just need 1 can of formula. I'll pay you back. Please don't block me." He froze, his finger hovering over the delete button. Something stirred in him, something odd and unfamiliar, like his long dead heart had just been brushed by someone's touch. He tapped on the attached photo. A young woman, no older than 25, sat on the floor with two babies. She wore a worn-out sweater, her hair loosely tied, but her eyes, tired yet peaceful, pierced right through him. She was feeding one of the babies a bottle while the other slept soundly, chubby cheek pressed against her shoulder. The lighting was dim, the photo grainy, but her expression, it was like a sorrowful melody, pulling from him memories he tried desperately to bury. Dominic shook his head, trying to push away the odd feeling. "Wrong number," he muttered, his deep voice echoing through the silent room. He moved to delete the message, but her eyes lingered in his mind. He thought of Sophia, how she would stay up for nights rocking Ava to sleep, her eyes always gentle, always strong. He thought of Ava, her round cheeks and bell-like giggle. A sharp pain twisted in his chest, but this time, it wasn't just grief. There was something else, something like a faint ray of light piercing the darkness. He looked at the photo again, his finger grazing the screen. The woman didn't look like Sophia, but her eyes. They made him feel alive again, even if just barely. Dominic didn't know why. He wasn't a sentimental man. He'd turned down countless charity invitations, avoided every event involving children, and kept the world at arm's length. But this woman, with her twins and her quiet plea, had shaken something in him. Without another thought, Dominic opened his banking app. He typed in $200, entered the unfamiliar number, and hit send. No note, no explanation. He didn't want to be involved. He deleted the entire conversation afterward, as if to erase the strange impulse he'd just acted on. Yet as he walked back toward the window, his eyes instinctively searched the glittering city below. Somewhere out there, she was struggling to survive. Just this once, he told himself. But even he didn't believe it. Dominic returned to his desk, trying to focus on the report, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the photo. Who was she? A single mom? Homeless? Or just someone going through a rough patch? He didn't know, and he didn't want to know. Still, deep inside, he felt something shift, like a small crack forming in the frozen wall he'd built around his heart. He poured himself a glass of whiskey from the minibar, hoping the burning liquor would drown the unease. But it didn't. He thought of Ava, of those nights when he used to cradle her and sing lullabies. Badly, Sophia would tease, always off-key. He thought of Sophia, who believed he was a good man, even when he couldn't believe it himself. "You were wrong, Sophia," he murmured, staring into the dark beyond the window. "I'm not a good man. I just don't want someone else to suffer the way I did." Setting the whiskey down, he returned to his desk and shut his laptop. He knew he wouldn't sleep tonight. He never did. But this time, instead of sirens or headlights haunting him, it was the woman's eyes from the photo. They lingered in his mind like a quiet note, one that struck a long-forgotten chord in a heart that had been silent for too long. Meanwhile, across the city, in a cramped little room, Emery Lane clutched her phone, tears sliding down her cheeks. She stared at the $200 transfer notification from an unknown sender, her heart pounding. "Thank you, whoever you are," she whispered, glancing over at Lily and Leo sleeping peacefully in their crib. She had no idea that the man who had sent her that money was now standing alone in a glass tower, wrestling with feelings he no longer dared to name. It was early morning, and the sky over New York was heavy and gray, clouds thick with the promise of rain. Emery Lane pushed an old double stroller down a quiet Brooklyn street, Lily and Leo bundled under thin blankets, their wide eyes curiously taking in the world. After working the night shift at the diner, Emery had only managed a few hours of sleep, but the $200 transfer from a stranger the night before gave her the strength to push through the fatigue. She decided to use part of the money for baby formula and some groceries, hoping it would last until her next paycheck. The convenience store was just a few blocks away, small but always busy in the morning. Emery tied her hair back, checked her wallet, just a few crumpled bills, and the cash she had withdrawn from the transfer, then stepped inside. The smell of fresh bread wafted through the air, reminding her of her Juilliard days, when she and her classmates would stop by a bakery after practice. She shook her head, clearing the memory. "No time for dreaming," she whispered to herself, steering the stroller toward the baby formula aisle. As Emery carefully examined a can of formula, a few steps behind her, Dominic Kane walked into the store. He wore a tailored gray suit, his usual cold expression in place, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion after yet another sleepless night. Dominic rarely ran errands himself. His assistant handled everything, but this morning he needed to get out. He needed air, as if escaping the weight of the photo he couldn't forget. The image of the young woman with 2 babies still haunted him, despite his efforts to push it away. Dominic grabbed a bottle of water and headed toward the counter, but a soft cry behind him made him freeze. A baby's cry. His chest tightened. It reminded him of Ava, his daughter, and the nights he used to hold her, trying to soothe her to sleep. He turned to leave quickly, but just then, Emery pushed the stroller past and accidentally bumped into him. The water bottle slipped from Dominic's hand and rolled across the floor. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," Emery said quickly, bending to pick it up, her face flushed with embarrassment. She looked up and met a pair of deep, unreadable eyes. The man standing before her was tall, commanding, and sharply dressed. But there was something in his gaze, something tired, something sad. Dominic stared at her, and for a heartbeat, time stopped. He recognized her instantly, the same eyes from the photo, weary but kind. And the babies in the stroller, with their round cheeks and soft curls, were unmistakably the same. "It's fine," Dominic replied, his voice low and quiet. He reached for the bottle, but his eyes stayed locked on Emery. She wore a thin coat, her hair tied up, and though clearly exhausted, there was a simple beauty about her that made it impossible to look away. Emery offered a shy smile and rolled the stroller aside to give him room, then returned to the formula shelf. Unaware that the man she had just bumped into was the same stranger who had sent her the money. Dominic stood there, gripping the bottle tightly, torn. He wanted to say something, anything, but he didn't know how to begin. He wasn't used to starting conversations, especially not with strangers. Eventually, he turned and walked to the checkout, telling himself it was just a coincidence. But as he stepped outside, the rain began to fall. Emery paid for her items and pushed the stroller to the door. Rain now poured steadily, and the cold wind made her shiver. She pulled up her hood and glanced down at Lily and Leo. "Just a few more blocks, babies. We'll be okay," she whispered, though her voice trembled. She had no umbrella and the stroller didn't provide much cover. Just then, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb. Dominic stepped out from the driver's seat, holding a large umbrella. His expression was still composed, but there was a softness in his eyes. "Wind like this makes babies sick," he said evenly, as if he were just making an observation about the weather. He opened the back door and gestured toward her. "Get in. I'll take you home." Emery froze, her hands gripping the stroller handle. I'm okay, thank you," she stammered, unaccustomed to kindness from a stranger, especially one who looked like he'd stepped off the cover of Forbes. But the rain was getting worse, and Leo had begun to fuss. She glanced at Dominic, searching his eyes for intent. All she saw was a sincerity she couldn't explain. "It's just a ride," Dominic said, his tone calm but firm. "I won't leave kids in the rain." Emery bit her lip, then nodded. With Dominic's help, she folded the stroller and loaded it into the back. She gently lifted Lily and Leo into the back seat, and Dominic held the umbrella steady, making sure not a single drop touched the babies. Once Emery was seated, she whispered, "Thank you. Really, I live just a few blocks away, on Maple Street." Dominic didn't respond. He simply nodded and closed the door. He drove through the rain-slick streets in silence, the only sound the steady tap of raindrops against the windows. Emery clutched her twins close, heart pounding. She didn't know why this man was helping her, but his kindness warmed her more than she expected. She figured he was just a good man, a wealthy businessman with a soft heart. Dominic, meanwhile, kept his hands tight on the wheel, trying to maintain his composure. He knew who she was. He knew she was the woman from the photo, but he didn't want her to know that. He didn't want to get involved, didn't want to peel back the old wounds, and yet each time he glanced at the rearview mirror and saw Emery gently soothing her babies, he felt something stir inside. Not pain, but a flicker of hope. something he hadn't felt since the accident. When the SUV pulled up in front of Emery's worn apartment building, the rain had begun to ease. She stepped out, holding Lily and Leo in her arms, and turned back to him. "You really are a kind man," she said, offering a tired but genuine smile. "I'm Emery, and these are Lily and Leo." Dominic gave a small nod, offering no name in return. "Be careful in the rain," he said simply, then pulled away before she could ask more. Emery stood there, watching the SUV disappear into the drizzle, a strange feeling swelling in her chest. She had no idea that the man who had just helped her was the same one who had sent her the $200 the night before, and that this encounter was only the beginning of something much bigger. The late afternoon sun cast a warm amber glow over the streets of Brooklyn, but Emery Lane had no time to admire it. She had just finished her shift at Daisy's Diner, where she worked night hours to support her twin babies, Lily and Leo. Her legs ached from 8 hours of nonstop standing, but a smile still lingered on her lips at the thought of her little angels waiting for her at home. Her bag felt heavier than usual, thanks to a $100 tip from a stranger. It was an unusually generous amount, and she felt both surprised and deeply grateful. What Emery didn't know was that the tipper had been Dominic Kane. That afternoon, Dominic had stopped by Daisy's Diner after a nearby meeting. He recognized Emery the moment she brought the menu, those familiar, tired yet kind eyes, that polite smile concealing deep fatigue. He ordered a cup of coffee, barely touched it, and quietly watched as she moved between tables, jotting orders with quick hands and speaking softly to customers. When he left, he placed a $100 bill beneath the check, saying nothing, pretending it was just another routine gesture. But deep down, he knew he was searching for a reason to stay connected. To her, even if he couldn't admit it to himself. Later that day, Emery pushed the double stroller down Maple Street, humming a children's song while Lily and Leo giggled. She stopped at a small park near home, letting the twins watch golden leaves drift to the ground. The sunset lit up her face, hiding the dark circles under her eyes. She was in the middle of telling Lily a story when a sleek black SUV pulled up nearby. Dominic stepped out, still in his expensive gray suit. His face was stoic as ever, but there was something gentler in his eyes this time. "You shouldn't keep babies out this long when it's cold," Dominic said in his deep voice, more concerned than critical. Emery looked up and immediately recognized the man who had driven her home in the rain a few days earlier. She gave a shy smile, slightly embarrassed. "Just for a bit. They like being outside, but thank you for that time and now." Dominic didn't reply. His eyes rested on Lily and Leo, his chest tightening. They reminded him of Ava, his daughter. But this time, the pain didn't cut as sharply. Instead, there was a strange pull in him, a need to protect, to make sure this young woman and her children didn't suffer more than they already had. "Get in," he said, opening the back door. "I'll take you home." Emery hesitated, but the wind was colder than she'd expected, and Leo was starting to squirm. She nodded. With Dominic's help, she folded the stroller and loaded it into the back, then lifted Lily and Leo into the back seat. Inside the car, the air was still, broken only by the soft breathing of the twins. Emery glanced at Dominic, curiosity growing. He drove with focused silence, but his eyes, glimpsed now and then in the rearview mirror, held an unspoken sorrow. When the car pulled up in front of her old apartment building, Emery turned to thank him. "You really are kind," she said sincerely. Then on impulse, she added, "If you're not in a rush, would you stay for dinner? It's just simple spaghetti, but I'd like to say thank you." Dominic paused, caught off guard. He meant to say no. He didn't do family dinners, didn't do closeness. But Emery's eyes, hopeful and honest, made refusal impossible. "All right," he said, his voice low, as if even he didn't believe it. Emery's small apartment was modest, but warm with the scent of simmering herbs from a pot of spaghetti. She placed Lily and Leo in their crib, then moved quickly around the kitchen. Dominic sat stiffly in an old armchair, feeling out of place, but oddly not uncomfortable. He watched Emery move through the cramped kitchen, humming a soft melody he didn't recognize. She spoke of Lily and Leo, how Leo liked chewing on his fingers, and Lily laughed every time she heard music. Dominic listened without saying much, but every word she spoke settled into his chest like notes on a forgotten piano. Dinner was simple at a small wooden table. Emery apologized for not having wine, only water, but Dominic shook his head. "This is enough," he said, and for the first time in years, he felt that a meal had flavor. After dinner, Emery carried Lily and Leo into the bedroom and rocked them to sleep. Dominic stood ready to leave, but before reaching the door, he pulled a slip of paper from his notebook, quickly jotted down his number and handed it to her. "If you ever need anything, call me," he said. His voice was neutral, but his eyes were sincere. Emery smiled as she accepted the note. "Thank you. I'm Emery. And you?" "Dominic," he replied, then turned and disappeared into the dim hallway. Emery closed the door, her heart feeling strangely lighter. She pulled out her phone, entered his number, and considered what to save him as, maybe Dominic, the kind man. But as she looked at the string of numbers, she froze. Her heart pounded. Her hands trembled. She opened the transfer notification from the other night and compared the digits. It wasn't a coincidence. This is the number from the money transfer?" she whispered, eyes wide with shock. She sank into a chair, clutching her phone as if afraid the number might vanish. Suddenly, everything made sense. The man who drove her home in the rain, who had dinner with her, who gave her his number, he was the one who had quietly sent her $200 when she had nothing left. Tears slid down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude. She looked toward the crib, where Lily and Leo slept peacefully, and whispered, "Thank you, Dominic, even if you didn't want me to know." Elsewhere in the city, Dominic sat in his penthouse, New York's glittering skyline beyond the glass. He held a glass of whiskey, untouched. He thought about Emery, about her smile, about Lily and Leo's laughter. For the first time in 5 years, his heart didn't feel frozen, but he was afraid that opening it again would let the old pain return. He closed his eyes, telling himself it was just coincidence. But deep down, he knew he had arrived at a crossroads, and there was no turning back. Late afternoon light filtered through the window of Emery Lane's tiny apartment, casting a warm amber glow that softened the cracks along the walls. Dominic Kane stood at the door, holding a paper bag containing 2 cans of formula and a few small toys for Lily and Leo, Emery's 5-month-old twins. It had been over a week since that simple dinner here, but the image of her tired yet genuine smile, the giggles of the 2 babies, still lingered in his mind, like a melody he couldn't shake. Emery opened the door, her eyes wide with surprise. She wore a thin sweater, her hair loosely tied, the shadows under her eyes still visible, but her face lit up when she saw Dominic. "You came back?" she asked, her voice tinged with awkwardness. Dominic held up the bag, his tone even and low. "I thought the kids might need these." She invited him in, setting the bag on the kitchen table and checking its contents. 2 high-quality formula cans, a stuffed bear for Lily, and a soft stacking toy for Leo. Emery turned to him, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you, Dominic. And for the $200 last time. I'll pay you back as soon as I can, I promise." Dominic shook his head, about to say she didn't need to, but the resolute look in Emery's eyes stopped him. She didn't want to owe anyone. He understood that. Emery brewed 2 cups of cheap tea and sat across from him at the small table, cradling her cup like it held the last bit of warmth in the world. She took a deep breath, her voice low and steady, like opening a chapter she'd long kept closed. "I used to think I'd perform at Carnegie Hall," she said, eyes drifting into the distance. "I studied piano at Juilliard. People called me the Golden Fingers. But then I met Ethan, and I fell for him, completely." She let out a dry, humorless laugh. "When I got pregnant, he left. My parents disowned me. I lost everything: school, dreams, family. All I had left were Lily and Leo, and I don't regret them, not for a second. But there are nights when I didn't know if I could keep going." She paused, her hands tightening around the teacup. Then she looked up at Dominic, her eyes vulnerable but steady. "The night I sent that message asking for money, I was desperate. The last can of formula had barely 1 scoop left, and I didn't know how I'd feed them the next day. I meant to message an old friend, but my hands were shaking so badly I sent it to the wrong number. I thought I had hit rock bottom, that no one cared. But then, your $200 came through. It felt like a miracle. She smiled through her tears. It wasn't just the money, Dominic. It was hope. It reminded me I had to keep going. For them. Dominic sat in silence, a knot tightening in his chest. He hadn't realized that a random impulse could mean so much. He wanted to respond, but words caught in his throat. Instead, he looked at her, his expression complicated, and for the first time in 5 years, he didn't feel like a hollow man just surviving a tragedy. He drew a breath, then unexpectedly spoke, his voice hoarse. I used to have a family, he said, his gaze shifting to the window as if afraid to meet her eyes. Sophia, my wife, and Ava, our daughter. 5 years ago, a car accident took them from me. I stayed behind, but I didn't really live. I couldn't go near children, couldn't hear them laugh. It reminded me too much of Ava. Emery's hand rose to cover her mouth, her eyes brimming. She hadn't expected such deep wounds from the quiet, stoic man before her. I'm so sorry, she whispered. Dominic shook his head, a sad smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Don't be. The strange thing is, when I hear Lily and Leo laugh, it doesn't hurt. It feels peaceful. His words struck Emery deeply. She looked from the crib to Dominic, a strange feeling blooming in her chest. She didn't know why he was opening up, but she understood the courage it took. She said nothing, just nodded gently, letting the silence speak. That evening, Dominic stayed longer than he'd planned. He sat on the floor watching Emery play with the twins. His eyes softened as he observed her rocking Leo, making silly faces at Lily. When night fell, Emery laid the babies in their crib and pulled an old electric keyboard from the corner. I usually play a little to help them sleep, she said, fingers brushing the keys. She played a Chopin nocturne, slow, delicate, like a whispered lullaby. Dominic stood still, barely breathing. Though she hadn't performed in a long time, her fingers still moved with grace and feeling. The room filled with music, not the kind born in concert halls, but something raw, intimate, alive. He watched her, her hair falling over her shoulder, eyes half closed, lost in the music, and he realized the music had never left her, no matter how hard life had tried to silence it. When the final note faded, Lily and Leo were fast asleep. Emery didn't move right away. She smiled shyly, a little embarrassed. I'm not as good as I used to be, but playing helps me remember who I am. Dominic didn't respond immediately. He simply looked at her, eyes deep and still. You haven't lost it, he said, his voice quiet. The music is still there, and it's beautiful. Like you. The words made Emery blush, her heart racing. She turned away quickly, pretending to adjust the baby's blanket. Dominic stood, knowing it was time to leave. Thank you, Emery, he said at the door, for the music and for sharing your story. She smiled and walked him out. After the door closed, she sat beside the crib, watching her baby sleep. Her heart overflowed with emotion. She thought of Dominic, of what he'd told her, of the $200 that had pulled her back from the edge. She didn't know what he meant to her yet, but she knew one thing for certain. He had given her more than money. He had given her the feeling that she wasn't alone. Meanwhile, in his lavish penthouse, Dominic sat in the dark. A glass of whiskey rested untouched on the table. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in 5 years, he didn't see headlights or hear screeching tires. Instead, he heard Emery's nocturne, soft, alive, and full of something he hadn't felt in years. A reminder that even a wounded heart could still learn how to beat again. Morning in Brooklyn was cloaked in fog, but inside Emery Lane's tiny apartment, the air was heavier than the clouds outside. She sat beside the crib, gently patting Lily and Leo, but her eyes were weighed down with worry. A week earlier, Ethan, the ex-boyfriend who had abandoned her when she became pregnant, had unexpectedly returned, not to apologize, but to disrupt the fragile life she had fought to rebuild. He arrived like a ghost, bringing sweet-sounding lies and a bitter plan. He came one afternoon, knocking on her door with the same smile that once blinded her 3 years ago. Dressed sharply, hair perfectly styled, Ethan still had the same calculating glint in his eyes. Emery, I was wrong. he said, feigning remorse. I want to come back. I want to make things right. For you and the kids. We could be a family. He stepped forward, trying to touch her hand. But Emery pulled back, heart pounding with anger and hurt. You left me when I needed you most, she said, voice trembling but firm. You don't deserve Lily and Leo. You don't belong in our lives. She slammed the door before he could say another word. But Emery didn't know that her rejection had ignited a fire in Ethan, fueled by jealousy. He had heard from an acquaintance that Emery was now being supported by a wealthy man, Dominic Kane, and it infuriated him. If he couldn't have her, he would make sure she lost everything. A few days later, Emery received a notice from the court. Ethan had filed for custody of Lily and Leo. The petition listed cruel accusations, that Emery was unemployed, though she worked nightly at Daisy's Diner, that she lived in an unstable rental, and that she had dropped out of Juilliard, proof, he claimed, that she was unfit to be a mother. The lawsuit felt like a knife, digging into the very struggles Ethan himself had caused, now twisted into weapons against her. Holding Leo tightly, Emery let silent tears fall, but forced herself not to break. She wasn't afraid of the accusations themselves. She was afraid of losing Lily and Leo, the only reason she kept going. I won't let anyone take you away, she whispered to her babies, though her voice shook with fear. She thought about Ethan, the man who once swore eternal love, now using their children for revenge simply because she had refused him. She knew he didn't love them. He just wanted to hurt her. Dominic Kane found out about the situation when he stopped by one evening with a box of cookies for the twins. He noticed it immediately. Emery's warmth was gone. Her eyes were red, her hands shaking as she handed him a cup of tea. She told him everything, from Ethan's sudden reappearance and false promises to the custody filing. He said he wanted to come back, but I couldn't forgive him, she said, voice cracking. Now he wants to take Lily and Leo, just because I wouldn't give him what he wanted. If I lose them, I won't survive it. Dominic sat quietly, his chest tightening. He looked at Emery, a 23-year-old who had already endured more pain than most, and now she had to face the very man who betrayed her. He thought of Sophia and Ava, of the pain of losing a family, and he knew one thing. He couldn't let Emery go through that. You won't lose them, he said, his voice steady, resolute. I'll help you. Without giving her a chance to protest, Dominic contacted Elena Harper, one of New York's top attorneys specializing in custody disputes. He insisted Elena take the case, ensuring Emery had the best possible support. Elena met with Emery the next day, bringing with her a calm confidence. Ethan doesn't have a solid case, Elena said, placing a reassuring hand on Emery's shoulder. We'll prove you're a wonderful mother. But even with a strong legal team, Emery couldn't shake the fear. Every night she lay awake, holding Lily and Leo, imagining the judge declaring she'd lost them. She remembered those cold nights during pregnancy, when Ethan abandoned her and she had no one. She had survived all of it. But now he was back, not out of love, but out of jealousy and spite. She thought about Dominic, the stranger who responded to her accidental message and never turned away. And with that came a mix of gratitude and guilt. She was afraid she was dragging him into her chaos, but Dominic didn't see it as chaos. He worked closely with Elena, supplying details about Emery's life, her steady job, her loving care for the twins. He even hired a private investigator who uncovered Ethan's past involvement with drugs, evidence that could seriously weaken his case. More than anything, Dominic showed up, not just through lawyers. He visited often, bringing toys for the twins, listening as Emery opened up about her deepest fears. One evening, as Emery played a soft piano lullaby to soothe Lily and Leo to sleep, she looked at Dominic sitting quietly in her old armchair. Why are you doing all of this? She asked gently. I have nothing to offer in return. Dominic met her gaze, his eyes deep and calm. Because I know what it feels like to lose a family, he said, and I don't want you to go through that. His words made Emery swallow hard. Her hands trembled on the keys. She thought of the $200 he sent on the night she nearly gave up, of the rides in the rain, of the way he looked at Lily and Leo, not just with kindness, but something close to love. She realized then that Dominic wasn't just a benefactor. He was a man healing from his own pain, and she, along with her children, had become part of that journey. Still, as the court date approached, Emery's fear grew stronger. She started keeping a journal, writing down every memory with Lily and Leo, as if afraid there might come a day she couldn't hold them anymore. She practiced answering Elena's questions, training herself to stay composed, but each time she thought of Ethan in court, her heart clenched. She knew he wasn't worthy, but he had money, and charm, and cunning. Back in the penthouse, Dominic sat in the dark, staring out over the lights of New York. He thought of Emery, her resilience, and of Lily and Leo, the children who had made his heart beat again. He picked up the phone and called Elena. "Make sure she wins," he said, his voice low and firm, "at any cost." In the days leading up to the custody hearing, Emery Lane lived in a whirlwind of fear and resolve. Ethan's lawsuit, the same man who had abandoned her and now sought to take Lily and Leo, hung over her like a storm cloud. Yet despite the trembling in her hands when she held her babies, Emery refused to fall apart. She knew Dominic Kane, through the powerful attorney Elena Harper, was doing everything in his reach to protect her. But Emery didn't want to hide behind him. She wanted to fight, not just as a mother, but as an artist, as the woman she once dreamed of becoming. One morning, while pushing the double stroller through the small park near her apartment, Emery overheard a group of mothers talking about a charity piano concert being organized to raise funds for underprivileged children. The organizers were looking for volunteer performers. Emery stopped in her tracks, heart pounding. She hadn't played in front of a crowd since leaving Juilliard, but just thinking about the stage, the keys beneath her fingers, made her remember who she truly was. Summoning her courage, she reached out to the organizers and offered to play, a piece she had composed herself, written during nights of despair when only Lily and Leo were there to keep her going. The piece, titled Dawn, told her story of loss, pain, and the quiet hope that rose like sunlight through the darkness. Emery practiced every night on her old electric keyboard after the twins were asleep. Her fingers, slowly but surely, began to regain the grace that once earned her the nickname Golden Hands. She didn't tell Dominic, not out of secrecy, but because she wanted to do this for herself, to prove she could face Ethan and the world on her own terms. The performance took place in a small Manhattan theater, packed with an eager crowd. Emery stood backstage wearing a simple black dress borrowed from a friend, hands trembling as she peeked through the curtain. Her breath caught when she spotted Dominic in the third row. His eyes were calm, quietly encouraging, though he didn't know she was performing. His presence gave her strength. When the announcer called her name, Emery took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage, taking her seat at the gleaming grand piano. She began to play Dawn. The first notes were soft, hesitant, like lonely footsteps in the dark, then gradually grew stronger, brighter, as if chasing away the night. The room fell silent. All eyes were on her. Emery's fingers danced over the keys, not as a waitress, not as a struggling single mother, but as an artist, a storyteller. When the final note faded, the room erupted in applause. Emery stood, tears on her cheeks, but smiling, the smile of someone who had just reclaimed herself. The performance caught the attention of the media. The New York Times ran a story calling her a piano star reborn from the shadows, sharing her journey from Juilliard talent to resilient single mother. A video of her playing Dawn spread across the internet, and just days later, Emery received an email from Juilliard. The school invited her to return and complete her program, with an honorary scholarship recognizing her talent and perseverance. Emery read the email, hands shaking in disbelief. She hugged Lily and Leo close, whispering, "Mommy did it, babies." What she didn't know was that Dominic had quietly orchestrated the scholarship behind the scenes. After the concert, he reached out to a Juilliard board member and offered to fund her return anonymously. He didn't want her to feel indebted. In his eyes, Emery deserved the opportunity, not because of him, but because she had earned it. A few days later, Dominic visited with a small bouquet of flowers, a rare gesture from the usually reserved man. Emery welcomed him in, eyes shining as she told him about the Juilliard email. "I still can't believe it," she said, her voice filled with joy. "I thought that dream was dead, but now I want to go back. for Lily and Leo, and for myself. Dominic smiled, a rare, genuine smile. You deserve it, he said softly. But when Emery brought up the upcoming custody hearing, the light dimmed slightly in her eyes. She knew the performance and scholarship were massive steps forward, but Ethan was still a threat. He could twist anything against her financial struggles, her past, her dropout status. She gripped Dominic's hand, voice steady but trembling. I'll fight, Dominic. As a mother and as an artist. I don't need to be saved. I'll stand on my own. Her words left Dominic speechless. He looked at her and saw someone entirely transformed, not the desperate woman from a mistaken message, but a powerful, self-possessed woman, ready to face whatever came next. He thought of Sophia and Ava, and how long he'd allowed his pain to imprison him. Emery was teaching him how to live again. I believe in you, he said, voice low, and I'll be right here, whatever path you choose. With only a few days left before the hearing, Emery prepared with Elena. They rehearsed her testimony and gathered evidence of her devotion to Lily and Leo. Emery even submitted the video of Dawn as part of her case, a statement that she wasn't just a struggling mother, but an artist with a future. But each night she still held her babies tightly, journaling every small memory, afraid they might one day be all she had left. In his penthouse, Dominic sat in the dark, watching the lights of New York flicker. He thought of Emery, of the strength in her eyes, of the music she'd played. He knew she didn't need him to save her, but he wanted to stand beside her, not as a savior, but as a friend, as someone learning to open his heart again. He picked up the phone and called Elena. She's going to win, right? He asked, his voice deep and unwavering. Elena replied without hesitation. After everything she's done, Ethan doesn't stand a chance. In her small apartment, Emery sat by her keyboard, playing Dawn once more to lull Lily and Leo to sleep. She looked down at her children, a fierce determination rising in her chest. She didn't know Dominic had helped with her scholarship, but she could feel his quiet presence, steady and reassuring. Mommy's going to do this, she whispered, and this time she believed it. The courtroom in downtown Manhattan was cold and solemn, its dark mahogany walls and long benches silent witnesses to countless stories of conflict. Emery Lane sat at the petitioner's table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as she tried to steady her breathing. She wore a simple business dress borrowed from her lawyer, Eleanor Harper. Though worry clouded her gaze, her eyes still shone with quiet resolve. In a nearby waiting room, Lily and Leo were being cared for by a sitter, but in Emery's heart, the image of her children was the only anchor keeping her from collapsing. Across the aisle sat Ethan, the man who had once abandoned her and now sought to take her children, with a smug expression and his sharp-tongued attorney by his side. The hearing began, and from the very start, Ethan's legal team launched a relentless assault. His lawyer, a silver-haired man with a clipped, commanding voice, rattled off a list of failures. Ms. Emery Lane lacks stable employment, working only as a waitress. She lives in a cramped rental unit, unfit for raising 2 children. She dropped out of Juilliard, which reflects irresponsibility and no clear future. Each word cut deep, dissecting the very hardships Ethan himself had helped cause. Emery bit her lip, digging her fingernails into her palms to keep herself grounded. She wanted to shout that she had done everything for Lily and Leo, that she never gave up. But Elena, calm and steady beside her, gave a subtle signal to remain composed. When it was her turn, Elena rose, her voice strong but composed as she dismantled each accusation one by one. Ms. Lane has consistent employment at Daisy's Diner. She has independently resumed her piano studies and recently performed at a charity concert praised by local media. She submitted a USB drive with the video of Emery's performance of Dawn. The courtroom watched in silence as Emery, poised and expressive, played her original composition. Her fingers danced across the keys, transforming hardship into beauty. Ms. Lane has been invited to return to Juilliard with an honorary scholarship, recognizing both her talent and resilience. As for her parenting, she has raised Lily and Leo with unwavering love and responsibility, without a cent of support from the man who abandoned her when she was pregnant. Elena continued, presenting evidence of Emery's steady income, receipts showing medical expenses paid in full, and testimonies from co-workers attesting to her dedication. Then she delivered the final blow. Documents detailing Ethan's past involvement with drugs and proof he had made no contributions, emotional or financial, for over 3 years. This man vanished when she needed him, Elena concluded, her tone crisp. He's not here for the children, he's here out of revenge, and he is undeserving of custody. Ethan shot up, face red with fury, but his attorney pulled him back down. Across the aisle, Emery looked at him and saw not the man she once loved, but a bitter stranger willing to weaponize their children to hurt her. She turned toward the audience and met Dominic's gaze. He sat still in the gallery, eyes calm and steady, a silent promise in their depth. Though he said nothing, his presence alone kept her grounded. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a measured gaze, reviewed the evidence in quiet contemplation. After a brief recess, she returned, her voice clear. Based on the evidence and testimony, this court grants full custody of Lily and Leo to Miss Emery Lane. The custody petition by Mr. Ethan Carter is hereby denied. The gavel struck the bench, a sound as final and cathartic as the end of a painful symphony. Ethan jumped up, face twisted in rage. "You'll regret this, Emery." But security swiftly escorted him out of the courtroom. Emery remained still, tears rolling silently down her cheeks, not out of fear, but from relief. She had won. Lily and Leo were still hers. Elena hugged her gently and whispered, "You did it!" As she walked out of the courtroom, Emery's steps felt lighter than they had in years. In the hallway, Dominic was waiting. His eyes were soft, proud. Without a word, he extended his hand. She took it, feeling the warmth in his palm. Together, they walked out of the courthouse, the Manhattan sun greeting them like a herald of new beginnings. Outside, Dominic paused and looked into Emery's eyes. "Now you can live your own life," he said gently. "And if you want, I'd love to be a part of it." Emery's heart raced. She thought of everything: the accidental text message, the nights of despair, the stage of dawn, and today's victory. Dominic had been there for all of it, not just as a benefactor, but as a friend, someone who had learned to open his heart alongside her. She smiled through tear-filled eyes. "I do," she whispered, gripping his hand tighter. "But first, I have to take Lily and Leo home." Dominic laughed softly, a rare, radiant smile, and nodded. They walked to the car, where the twins waited. Emery lifted her babies into her arms, feeling their warmth, and glanced at Dominic. Her heart surged, not just with gratitude, but with something deeper, a quiet, steady love built from shared pain and healing. That night in the small apartment, Emery sat beside her keyboard, playing Dawn to lull her children to sleep. But this time she wasn't playing alone. Dominic sat beside her, listening, and when the final note faded, he placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You never needed saving," he said quietly, "but I hope you'll let me walk with you." Emery smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. She knew the road ahead would still hold challenges: Juilliard, her career, hard days, but she no longer feared them. She had Lily and Leo, she had music, and she had Dominic, not as a hero, but as a companion willing to walk beside her into whatever future they would build. Far off in the shadows of the city, Ethan disappeared into the darkness, dragging his bitterness and defeat with him. He was no longer a threat, just a discordant note in the symphony of Emery's life. She closed her eyes, listening to the soft breathing of her babies, and for the first time in a long time, she knew. She had found the place she truly belonged. Are you still following the story? Please leave your thoughts on the story in the comments below. All your comments are the motivation for us to create better stories. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much. 2 years after winning the custody battle, Emery Lane stood at the gates of Juilliard, her heart pounding, not with fear, but with pride. At 25, she had returned to the place where her dreams were once left behind. Now she walked in with an honorary scholarship and a journey worth every struggle. Lily and Leo, now 3 years old, held her hands tightly, their wide eyes marveling at the grand buildings. Emery smiled, brushing their hair gently. "Mommy's about to graduate," she whispered. a wave of joy and gratitude swelling in her chest. Returning to Juilliard had not been easy. Emery had to balance intense piano classes, raising two toddlers, and working weekend shifts at Daisy's Diner. Many nights she stayed awake, practicing late into the night while checking on the twins. But she never gave up. She wasn't just doing this for herself, she was doing it to show Lily and Leo that no dream was impossible. Dominic Kane had remained quietly by her side. From arranging childcare when her schedule got overwhelming, to continuing to cover tuition under the name of an anonymous benefactor, he was always there. Emery never asked, but she felt his presence, like a steady anchor in the background of her life. Today was her graduation ceremony and her final performance at Juilliard. She would play a piece she had composed herself, titled For Those Who Stayed, a tribute to those who never left her. Lily, Leo, and Dominic. The music told a story, beginning with somber notes of loss, rising into the resilient rhythm of survival, and ending with a crescendo of radiant hope. The Juilliard concert hall was packed, the stage lights shining on the grand piano at center stage. Emery stepped out wearing an elegant black dress, her hair down, her eyes bright and calm. She scanned the crowd and saw Dominic sitting in the front row, dressed in a tailored gray suit, his gaze soft and full of silent pride. Beside him were Lily and Leo, bouncing in their seats, waving and shouting, "Go, Mommy! You're the best!" Emery took a deep breath and sat at the piano. She began to play For Those Who Stayed. The opening notes were slow and aching, like the nights she had wept in silence, the only sound being her children's cries. Then the tempo picked up, bold, steady, as if marking each step she had taken back to Juilliard. When the piece reached its climax, the notes soared, bright and triumphant, like sunlight piercing through years of darkness. The room fell utterly still. Dominic sat motionless, eyes glistening. He remembered the first time he'd heard her play, an old nocturne in a shabby apartment, her body exhausted, but her soul burning with hope. Now she was here, an artist, a mother, and a woman reborn from ashes. As the final note echoed into silence, the audience erupted into thunderous applause. Emery rose, bowed, tears streaming down her cheeks. But her smile radiated joy. She looked at Dominic, saw him standing, clapping, his face overwhelmed with emotion. Lily and Leo clapped wildly, and she couldn't help but laugh through her tears. Stepping off stage, she rushed to hug her children, wrapping her arms around their warm little bodies. Dominic approached, and without hesitation, Emery pulled him into the embrace. The three of them wrapped around him. No words spoken, but in that moment, they were a family. No paperwork needed, just love. After the concert, Emery received her diploma, a milestone she once thought forever out of reach. Outside the auditorium, she stood holding Lily and Leo, Dominic beside her, quietly snapping photos. A reporter from the New York Times who had covered her performance of Dawn 2 years ago approached her. "Ms. Lane, what helped you come back?" he asked. Emery looked at Lily, then Leo, then Dominic. "The people who stayed," she said simply. "They gave me a reason not to give up." That evening, in the apartment that now felt truly like home, Emery hosted a small celebration. She made Lily and Leo's favorite, spaghetti, and Dominic brought a bottle of wine, a rare indulgence for him. They sat around the wooden table laughing and eating. It was the first time Emery felt her life was whole. Lily and Leo, now talkative and energetic, chattered about the toys Mr. Dominic had given them, making him chuckle, a sound Emery loved more than any melody. After the twins were tucked in, Emery and Dominic sat on the old armchair, looking out at the shimmering lights of Brooklyn. She leaned her head on his shoulder, her voice quiet. "Thank you for staying." Dominic took her hand, his eyes steady and deep. "Thank you for giving me a reason to come back to life." Emery closed her eyes, listening to the soft breathing of Lily and Leo from the other room. She thought about everything, the mistaken text, the nights of despair, the Juilliard stage, and the man beside her now. She had returned to herself, not just as an artist, but as a mother, as a woman who had found her family. And whatever the future held, she knew one thing for certain: she would never walk it alone. 3 years after graduating from Juilliard, Emery Lane was no longer the waitress living in a cramped Brooklyn apartment. At 28, she had become a celebrated pianist, hailed in the press as the rebirth of classical fire. Her compositions, Dawn and For Those Who Stayed, had been performed on stages from Carnegie Hall to international venues. But for Emery, success wasn't measured by applause or spotlight. It was measured in the laughter of Lily and Leo, now 5 years old, and in the tender gaze of Dominic Kane, the man who never once left her side. Her life had become a balanced symphony. She performed, composed, and taught piano at a small music academy in Manhattan, where she inspired students with dreams like her own. Lily and Leo, with their curly hair and rosy cheeks, often played in her practice room, pressing random keys and making her laugh. Dominic, though still the head of Kane Enterprises, always made time for them, taking the kids to school or sitting quietly while Emery practiced late at night. One autumn afternoon, Prospect Park in Brooklyn glowed under golden sunlight. Emery sat on the grass beside a street piano set up for a community music event. Dressed in a soft white sweater, her hair down, she played a cheerful tune for a circle of children, including Lily and Leo, who giggled and ran around, occasionally running back to hug their mother, making passers-by smile. Dominic stood a few steps away, hands in his coat pockets, his eyes never leaving Emery. He watched her, the woman who had entered his life through a mistaken text and changed him forever. He remembered the early days when he was a cold, emotionally locked down CEO. Emery, with her resilience and music, had taught him how to love again, how to live again. And today he knew. It was time to say what he'd held in his heart for far too long. As Emery finished her song, the small crowd applauded. Lily and Leo ran to her, arms wide, wrapping around her tightly. She laughed, kissed their cheeks, and looked up, only to see Dominic walking toward her with an expression that was both soft and intense. He knelt before her, right there on the grass, drawing gasps from the onlookers. Lily and Leo squealed in delight. "What's Mr. Dominic doing?" From his pocket, Dominic pulled out a small velvet box and opened it, revealing a simple but elegant silver ring that shimmered in the light. He looked into Emery's eyes, voice deep and steady. "Emery, I don't want to just be the man who once helped you in the rain. I don't want to just be the one who listens to your music from the sidelines. I want to be your husband. I want to build a family, with you, with Lily, with Leo, and for myself." Emery froze, her hands covering her mouth as tears streamed down her face. She looked into his eyes and saw not just love, but a promise to stay, no matter what life brought. The crowd around them cheered, but for Emery, the world melted away until there was only Dominic and the two children. Through her tears, she laughed. "You know I'm not great at answering big questions, right?" Dominic smiled, rare and radiant. "Then just nod." And she did, nodded through tears, then threw her arms around him. Dominic slipped the ring onto her finger, pulling her into a tight embrace as Lily and Leo joined in, wrapping their little arms around both of them. A circle of love in the middle of the park. The crowd applauded. Some wiped their eyes. Emery leaned her head on Dominic's chest and whispered, "I thought family was something I had lost, but you gave me a new one." Dominic kissed her forehead and replied, "No, you gave me a family." The afternoon continued with music and laughter. Emery returned to the piano, improvising a playful tune as Lily and Leo danced around her, occasionally joining in with their giggles and improvised singing. Dominic sat on the grass nearby, watching them with a quiet joy he hadn't felt since before the accident. He thought of Sophia and Ava, and for the first time the memories didn't sting. He knew they would want him to be happy, and his happiness was right here, with Emery, Lily, and Leo. As the sun began to set, Emery and Dominic held hands, walking their children home. Not to a tiny apartment, but to a small house in Brooklyn, which Emery had purchased with the earnings from her performances. In the living room, a new grand piano sparkled under the soft light, a symbol of her journey. Lily and Leo ran ahead, begging their mom to play their favorite happy song, and Emery gave in, her fingers dancing across the keys, filling the house with cheerful music. Dominic stood behind her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders, and as the final notes played, he whispered in her ear, "Family is where the heart belongs, and mine belongs to you." Emery turned to him, kissed him softly, her smile glowing. She looked at Lily and Leo, giggling beside the piano, and knew with absolute certainty, no matter what the road ahead held, they would walk it together. As a family, where music,